We will have handouts for everybody. The handouts, though, are just the forms. We're going to talk about a lot more than just the forms. The forms are just the legal things that you need to do. Not even a question of should you, you should. And these are the forms, so you don't have to go out and get an estate lawyer and pay a couple thousand to them to give you the forms. You can fill them out yourself very, very easily. No problem. So, but we are going to talk about a lot of other things, obviously, because unless you've been through it before, you don't really know how all of the things that you have to consider as you age. So, and by the way, I'm sure there's a couple of you I haven't met yet. I'm Dr. Clermont. I'm obviously retired, but I was a general and vascular surgeon at St. Vincent's and taught at UMass for about 30 years. In fact, some of the people here come up to me because I've operated on them in the past. You know? It's always good to see somebody alive and well. But the reason I got into this particular thing, I had two in-laws, my father-in-law and mother-in-law, who passed away at our home. We brought them in and they passed away there individually. And that started me thinking about it and getting things sort of arranged. And then my mother went into a nursing home, and then my sister went into a nursing home. She's younger than me. And she was there for quite a while, passed away of dementia. And my mother died at age 99. So I'm hoping to outlive her, of course. But that really got me interested then in all of the other aspects of aging and all the things you need to do to prepare. And to make matters even, I guess, more down to earth to me, there were a number of people I met at the nursing home where my mother and my sister were who did not prepare.
Thank you.
And they kept asking questions. I don't think either of them ever fully got prepared. And their kids made the whole shambles once the elder person passed away. There were just arguments and all sorts of problems that occurred with those families. So I said, no, I'm not going to let this happen to my family. Even though the kids don't want a damn thing in the house, you know that once you pass away, I think I'd really like to get that tea set, or I'd really like to get this, or I'd really like to get that. And you don't put provisions in your will or your estate plan for that. And then the arguments start. So the basic bottom line for all of this is good preparation. While you still got it up here, that's the time to prepare. So we've divided it into two sections. The first one we're going to have today is how do you prepare. All the early things you need to get done. While you still have it all up here. All the early things you need to have done. And then the second part are the things you need to do at the end. Hopefully you still got enough up here to participate in it, but because you've prepared ahead of time, it's not quite as important. But these are the things that you need to at least have in your bank, like more or less. All the things you need to do. Okay. Well, let's get on with it. So, first thing I'm going to talk about is an estate. When I first gave this talk, I think probably, 5, 6, 7 years ago, wherever it was, I simply said the estate was everything you own. And basically that's about it. And I left it at that. Well, now, the first 10 minutes of this talk are going to be about your estate. And I know that it may not pertain to a lot of you, but it does pertain to more than you think, because you live in Massachusetts, which is the worst state for estate taxes in the country. The worst. Absolutely the worst. So let me get into it a little bit. Back in roughly about 2000, all of the states and the federal government all had a similar estate plan for all of the people, tax, etc. The states began breaking off in 2000 because of some legislation then, and so did Massachusetts. Ever since 2003 in Massachusetts, we've had $1 million exemption. Now, back in 2003, that's a lot of money. Well, it is a lot of money now. But they kept the definition of the estate, they kept the federal definition. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen the amount in the IRS, all of the different regulations. It is absolutely astounding. They define just about everything you can think of, from breathing to everything. And so, what is the federal definition of your estate? Because that's the definition we use here in Massachusetts. Okay? So, let's go through it. Your estate. It includes all of the vested investments. Now, what do I mean by that? Anything you have a legal right to. Anything that's vested. All things that are contingent. What do I mean by that? All the things that have a condition attached to it. And if you meet the condition, the funds are yours. All things real estate. Well, obviously it's not movable, like your house, etc. That's real estate. Land and house. Personal estate. Personal stuff are the things that are movable. That are in all of the materials, the antiques, all that stuff you got in the house. Okay, what else? Anything that's tangible. Well, what's tangible? Tangible could be your car, your boat, collectibles. Maybe you may be a stamp collector, a coin collector, antique collector. All those things are included in the estate, according to the federal definition. Also, intangibles, like your bank accounts, annuities, anything like that. That is the intangibles. All property that's held jointly. So, yeah, when you pass away, it goes to your spouse, but it's still part of your estate, according to the federal regulations. So that's counted as well. And basically, I think, wherever you own property, wherever you have this, this material, any country, doesn't make any difference. It's still part of your estate. So that's the complete definition, the federal definition of an estate. Now, just the property that you own, your home, alone, and you know how prices now, with all of our inflation, that's a good considerable amount of that $1 million right there. I know personally my house now is probably worth $750,000 to $800,000. That's quite a chunk. And then, what about all of the antiques? What about your stamp collection, your coin collection, all of the other things? You have to get that appraised. They don't do that cheaply either, and there are people who take weekend courses to do appraisals and all. I don't want them. I want somebody who knows something about that particular thing. Like, for example, the coins. I want a coin appraiser. I want a stamp appraiser. I want an antique appraiser. I want to know what my estate is worth, because you need to do it. You have to do this. So they don't make it easy on you. They don't make it easy at all. Very easy to get to that exemption amount. In other words, up to $1 million, you're okay. You don't have to pay an estate tax. Once you go over that $1 million, however, you then will be subject to an estate tax in Massachusetts. Now, there is a federal estate tax, but that exemption now is 11.7 million this year. This year. Mr. Biden wants to decrease that to 5 million, and probably will get it done. But at least as of this year, it's 11.7. Obviously, we don't qualify for that, thank God. But Massachusetts is just 1 million. And it's evaluated by what it's worth on the day you die. They don't care what you paid for your house. They don't care what you paid for that antique. It's what it's valued on the day that you die. Quite a bit more, most likely. And to make it even worse, it is not transferable. In other words, if I were to die, my wife would get, by virtue of being my wife, she would get whatever I had. But according to the regulations, she would not be able to take my $1 million and add it to her $1 million when she passes away. They call that portability. So they don't have portability in Massachusetts either. So as you can see, the laws really help the tax collector. Everybody hates tax collectors. I don't know, through history, tax collectors have not been favorite people. But they're no different now. No different. So that's the definition of the taxes. So, what do you do to decrease that? Well, a number of things you can do. Number one, you can spend some of it. Get it down. What the hell? Might as well. You earned it. Spend it. Go on vacation. Spend it. Buy some good booze. Get something good. You know, why not? You earned it. So that's number one. Number two, you can give gifts. You can give gifts to all your kids, for example. And now you can give up to $15,000 a year. So if you and your wife both give a gift, that's $30,000 per kid. I got 10 kids. That's $300,000 off right there. You know, I'm not going to give them $30,000 right away, but you know. But that is another thing you can do. And fortunately in Massachusetts we don't have an inheritance tax, so they don't have to pay tax on what you gave them. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing. As long as you keep it under that $15,000. Okay, so that's the second thing you can do. The third thing you can do, you can give a charitable donation. And those of you who have been to college, and now even some high schools, they have a great alumni office now that's bugging you all the time, telling you how you can give a charitable contribution to this college and make it tax efficient for yourself. So that is another way that you can decrease your estate. And they have some great plans. You can give it, for example, you can give an annuity. Now say I gave a $50,000 annuity to Harvard or wherever, Holy Cross. I get bugged by all of them. So say I give $50,000 annuity. But say I bought that annuity 30 years ago. Obviously, it's gained a lot of capital gains, etc., over that 30 years. So one way you can do it is to donate the annuity to the college, take it as a tax deduction, buy the annuity back from the college, and then your cost basis, in other words, all those 30 years worth of capital gains, you don't have to worry about anymore. Because now there'll be a new cash basis when you just bought it now. So that's another way that you can decrease your estate. Another thing that I have in mind is a credit shelter trust. Credit shelter trust. It used to be known as a bypass trust. How do you set that up? Well, we're going to talk about the next thing after the will. We're going to talk about a revocable living trust. And as part of that revocable living trust, I have a credit shelter trust. So I am going to put it in perspective. I'm going to talk about it when we talk about the trust. So make sure sometimes I do forget, so if I do, hey, wait, what about that credit shelter trust now? Okay. Okay. Those are the ways that you can decrease your estate. Okay. How do they figure out the estate? Well, they figure it out from your adjusted gross income, your income tax. Adjusted gross income. That's a very important number, that adjusted gross income, because of several things. Number one, obviously, basis for your estate tax or no estate tax. And incidentally, the estate tax in Massachusetts, if you just go over the million, it's at its lowest ebb. So probably only going to pay 2%, 3%. But as you add to that, it goes up to 16%. So if you've got, say, $3 million, 16% of that is a good chunk of money. So it is a graduated expense. I should have mentioned that when I went through it. Okay. How do they figure it out? Well, they have that adjusted gross income now. And they add to that all of the non-taxable interest. Now, I don't know if any of you have taxable or non-taxable interest. A lot of us who have different things like annuities, etc., you have both. Right. But obviously the taxable goes into the income tax thing. The non-taxable, you don't have to pay the tax for. But it is part now of that adjusted gross income. That's how they figure it out. And also remember that you wind up paying money for Part A and Part B and Part D of Medicare. We all pay Part B and Part D. How do they determine how much they charge you for that every year? We don't all pay the same amount. You may think so. We don't. Because it's based on that adjusted gross income. Remember that. That's why you're paying different amounts. We all pay differently. And also remember, your Social Security might well be taxed as well. I know I pay 50% of my Social Security. That's taxed because I happen to be in that income range. If that adjusted gross income is $44,000 or less per couple, you don't have to pay any on your income, on your Social Security. If it's over that, a graduated amount is taken off. All the way up to 85% of your Social Security can be taxed, depending on the amount of money in that adjusted gross income. So you can see that they get you any way they can. It affects your Medicare, affects Social Security tax as well. Okay, so let's go on. The very first document you have is the will. So let's talk a little bit about a will. Now, the will is a legal binding instrument. And what it does is that it directs who will receive all of your estate upon your death. That's basically what it is. Many people don't still have a will. I don't know why, but they don't have a will. And just because you have just a will does not avoid all of this going to probate when you pass away. That will has to go, if you have no other documents, that will have to go to probate court, probate and family court. Very, very busy court. So it takes average of 6 to 9 months before they're gonna make any kind of decision. The probate judge has to approve that will. And they have to approve the executor of that will. They have to approve both of those. We're gonna talk a little further about probate too in the near.
Can I
Yes.
ask you a question? Are wills between states reciprocal?
Yes.
So
Yeah,
it
your
doesn't
will
really matter
is-
where your will is.
Your will
from.
is good. Your
Thank
will is
you.
good. You don't need a will for every state.
Okay, good.
So, that copy of your will, I'm going to, I got a copy here so that I can tell you exactly what it says. Oh, incidentally, in my little musings and all, when I got all this planned and all, when you pass away, your executor has to file this form, 706. Filed, and it is 30 pages long. Much of the language in here I don't even understand, for God's sakes. It's old legal language. 30 pages of this crap that your executor's gonna have to fill out so that they can get the most money out of you. Oh, yeah, let's go into the will. There we go. Each state has its own individual form. So, I have the Massachusetts form. That's the one you just got. The Massachusetts form. Last will and testament.
Do these forms
Basically-
change much?
What's that?
Do these forms, like you said, that executor is 30 pages long, do these forms basically stay the same, or do they look them over every year, make adjustments?
Yeah. You can have, this is changeable. You can have make this over the next year, year after, because times change, things
Right, but I
change.
mean the system, their change on their end, not at your end.
You never know. You
Yeah,
never know. Every time the government changes hands, they screw around with this stuff too.
but you're saying there's a federal part and there's a state part.
You have to file both.
Right, so the state part, is it the same thing, you get a different government?
For the will, no, the will is the state,
Okay.
only the state. Only the state for the will. So let's go over that. Basically, you gotta name an executor of the will. Most people pick people in their family. Now, depending on, there's some people don't have a big family, so maybe they don't have someone that they can trust as being an executor. So you think about it very carefully. All these forms, when you name a trustee or you name an executor, make sure at least, number one, that they are qualified to be an executor. Make sure that they at least are willing to be an executor. It's amazing, some people will put a kid's name down, never even notify the kid that they're an executor of the will. That's happened, not that often, it happens. And so you gotta make sure not only are they willing, but are they capable of being an executor. So, and that's a decision you have to make.
So what happens if you screw that up and and you don't get do the right thing, what happens then?
Well, what, if you name somebody that you shouldn't have?
Yeah, though maybe they change their mind by that time.
Well, then you have to have a new will.
No, but if you're gone already.
Well, then you have,
You don't
Well,
really know until you're dead.
not much you can do from 6 feet
Then
under.
who does it go to? Then who does it go to? Is that person stuck doing the job?
They're stuck.
Okay. So there doesn't have to be a written agreement about that situation?
No, this is the agreement right here.
Okay, so there is a physical written agreement
Oh, yes. Yeah.
they have to fill out. And
Make-
does that have to be, do you keep that with your will, or does it have to be put somewhere state-wise, or what?
No, all of these things, all of these forms, et cetera, should go into a box in your house. And you know where it is, your executor knows where it is, your husband knows where it is. So at least, and maybe even your doctor, because there's health documents in there too. They need to know that this is where all your documents are, right there.
So if someone's house burns down though, then if you don't have another copy, it's all gone.
Well, you should keep a copy yourself, and then keep a copy somewhere else. Some people use a safety deposit box. I don't suggest that because it's not that easy to get into that box afterwards. So maybe your executor, or your son, your daughter, whatever, they should have a copy of it as well.
It's filed also, isn't it?
Yes.
Court, so.
So, number one, you name your executor. And now, disposal of property. This is where all the arguments come in. Like I said, no kid ever wants any of their family stuff. I know I got 10, and they don't want any of it. They don't want any right now. But make sure you spell out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Dining set goes to, boom. Stamp collection goes to, boom. The more you can fill out, the less the arguments are gonna be later. So disposition of property, they don't give you much room, you add another page. If you got a lot of stuff you wanna give to the kids and your benefactors, here's the place to do it. Okay, what's next? And you don't need to worry about a bond. What are the powers now that the executor has? These are the things here that they have to do. They have to abide by all of the things that are in that will. These are very standard things that they have to do. So, yes, I didn't come up with this, I just copied it all down. They're all the same, all the same. I don't care if a lawyer made it for you, they're all the same. Now, not in this particular one here, but you also have to think about your digital assets. Now, what are your digital assets? There are very few people who don't have a computer now. There are some, and I'm barely literate myself, but I have a computer. I've got dozens and dozens of passwords and all. I don't trust doing banking online, so I don't do the banking. Not because the computer is bad, it's because I screw things up. And this is what happens, is that you'll screw it up. So, I don't want to do that. And the only way to protect that is just don't do any banking by computer. Because as you start losing those neurons up here, it's very easy to screw it all up. It's amazing the trouble you can get into by doing it. So, digital assets. You keep a copy of all your digital assets. And there is a form. Unfortunately, I didn't give you the form, but there is a form that you can download if you do have a computer for outlining all your digital assets. So it'll have all of the passwords, all of the things you need to put down, and you need to name someone who will be an executor for the digital assets. That's all part of your will. So, That's a special part of the will. For example, I named one of my sons, who happens to be a computer engineer. I said, hey, ideal. I call him up, would you do this for me? Sure. So he is the executor for my digital assets when I pass away. I guess that's one luxury of having a large family. You can choose, you know, if somebody's a financial expert, oh, I know, or, yeah, okay. So these are the things that you think about. So, okay, so remember, digital assets go into the will as well. Then, to make it legal, you sign and you print. I remember the time immemorial, we always just signed it.
Yeah.
Now you gotta sign it and print it because some of the people can't read cursive anymore, so you gotta sign and print and date it. And then, to make it legal, 2 witnesses who saw you sign that and a notary. Once you get the 2 witnesses, your signature, it's dated and notarized, it's a legal document in Massachusetts. And that is it. Now, in this one here, it also says testamentary. Now, if you happen to have, well, your children, unfortunately, they're all over 18. But maybe you've got grandkids you're living with and you wanted to give them something. And you have to be 18 in order to accept this. So in order to ensure that they get what they should as a beneficiary, you fill out a testamentary form, a testamentary trust. So you're going to name a trustee to hold that money in account for them. And once they reach the age of 18, then they get the money. So that's the testamentary part of that. Okay. I think that's, okay. The only other thing I wanted to talk about with the will, let's say that, well, you can't remember everything to put down into that will. And so what you can do is add to the will a pour over will. P-O-U-R, pour over will. And what it pours over is anything else that you fail to think about to put into that will. Now, when do you need a pour over will? If you have a trust. We're going to spend a few minutes on the trust. We're going to talk about, that's the next thing, a revocable living trust. And I think I gave you a form for that as well. Why should you have a trust? Well, way back when, and I can do that now that I'm 81, I can go way back when again. We didn't have that sort of thing. The only people who had trusts were the ones who had $1 million plus. You know, they could afford all of the lawyers and all to get it done. But nowadays, it's a very smart idea to fill out that form for a revocable living trust. Revocable simply means that you can change it at any time. You have total control. But, and I'll tell you what the buts are, but whenever you have a trust and you want to have all of the stuff in the trust has to own what you put in. So for example, I put my house into the trust. So you can file what they call a quick claim deed immediately and assign the house to the trust. So, and all of the other stuff too. Say you have a couple of annuities. Well, you just notify the company that gives you, or doesn't, they don't give you the annuity, it costs a fair amount. But the company that I guess has the annuity, just tell them, listen, I want to change the owner to the trust. Very simple. So you put stuff into that revocable living trust. Now, what's the advantage of that? You still have control over it. You have control over everything that's in it. You can't, and you have to appoint a trustee. So again, you gotta think about it. Make sure the trustee is someone that you trust. Make sure they have at least some financial background. And that they're much younger than you. You don't want to outlive them. So that's basically what you do. And you can have more than one trustee. You can have 2 or 3. I know I have 2 of my kids. Both of them had some financial backup. Okay. The advantage to the trust is that you then avoid probate. Totally. Avoid probate with all that stuff that's in the trust. So, okay. So that's the difference between the will. If you just have a will, it goes to probate. They have to approve the will, approve the executor. That takes 6 to 9 months in Massachusetts. And leads to a lot of arguments with the kids. It does. You gotta consider that. Okay. Whereas the trust now, that's gonna take over, you avoid probate, totally. It's not a difficult thing once you have the form, it's not difficult. The lawyers want you to think it's difficult so you can spend $1,000 and get it done. It is not difficult. Okay.
So is there any limit that when people should start thinking of putting their valuables or things in a trust, like?
Well, before, remember I told you that it was just the millionaires that did it, you know?
Uh-huh.
Now, the advantage is you avoid probate. I don't care what your estate is worth.
Okay,
If you don't have to go to probate, you save, what, 9 months.
okay.
Plus, probate costs money.
Oh, okay.
And probate is public knowledge. Anybody can look it up. Hey, Dr. Clermont was worth throwing. Jesus, look at this. And all of a sudden, you're on the internet, you know? So, you want to try to avoid probate if at all possible. So let's talk for a moment about probate, huh? There. Whoa. Probate. Now, probate, I told you, probate and family court. Very, very busy court. And to get on the docket and all is a major delay trying to even get on. What do you do to get on? If you only have a will, what do you have to do? Well, first thing you have to do, you have to petition probate. This is the form. You don't have this one, but you can just get probate on your computer if you have a computer and download petition for a formal evaluation of the will. That's only 6 pages compared to the IRS, which is 30 pages, remember? Oh, I hate that. I had to do it twice. So probate. Probate itself is just a legal court that concludes, first of all of the legal and financial matters after death. So if your will goes to probate, they're going to make sure you pay. If you're over $1 million in Massachusetts, make sure all the taxes are paid, including the estate tax. They will also send letters to all the beneficiaries. Do you have any argument with the executor, or do you have any argument with the will at all? They have to come in and approve it. All of this takes time. Then they pay off the taxes, pay off any debts that you might have, and then they'll approve it, and then your executor can then distribute it to the beneficiaries. So that process takes a fair amount of time. And as I mentioned, it's also costly. I figure roughly about 10% of your estate just waiting for probate. 10% of your estate. And so, and remember too, it's also public too. So, and I think that's a very important point. So, I would highly recommend the revocable living trust for everybody. For everybody.
So do you still have to fill the 35-page paper for the federal when you have the
No.
revocable? You don't?
Oh, for the estate part.
Yeah, you do.
Oh, yeah.
You still have to,
You can't get away from that.
okay.
But you can get some help. You don't have to necessarily have a lawyer, even though it's mostly legal language and all. After a while, you understand all of the terms. You can still do it. You can still do it. Okay, so first you just petition probate. Probate then sends all those legal letters of authority out, so people will approve it or not approve it, whatever. Then they have to go through your will to make sure it's valid, make sure that, that every debt is paid, make sure the taxes are paid, and then finally distribution. So that's the thing why you really want to avoid probate, if you can. So,
So people go to probate court only if the beneficiaries are having, like arguments or differences with each other.
well,
Otherwise-
that's one of, no, you still have to, if you only have a will, you gotta go to probate.
Oh,
So that's why you need to avoid probate if you can. If you at all can. So, see, probate is different than the estate tax. Estate tax counts everything. Probate you can avoid. You can't avoid the estate tax, but at least you avoid one big headache.
So you says 35 pages, that estate tax?
30 pages.
30?
Bad
And
enough.
that's the federal government.
That's the federal, yep,
Even if you're under $1 million, you still have to fill that out?
yep, yep. Okay, let's go on. Let's go on from probate. Let's see, I have to follow my little cheat sheet so I don't leave anything out. Let's now talk about a durable power of attorney. And you do have the form for the durable power of attorney. I did give you that. Also, it's known as financial power of attorney. There's all sorts of different things. It's really a power of attorney for financial and for financial issues. Most of the time, it's used when people begin to get some signs of dementia, and they're no longer able to accurately figure out, because figures sometimes are difficult when you're starting to have a little sign of dementia. Figures are difficult with some people. Time then to think about a financial power of attorney. Basically, you name a person. And you should name a person, number one, who's willing to do it, and number two, who has a little expertise in financial affairs. It was easy for me because I had two people in my family who did. So I named that one and an alternative. That was easy for me. May not be so easy for you. But that is a very important piece of information that you need to do ahead of time. Ahead of time. Soon as somebody tells you, geez, you're forgetting not just your keys, you're forgetting who they are sometimes. You know? You're wandering sometimes. Uh-oh, okay. Time to get that financial power of attorney. You don't want to lose your bank account because you screwed it up, because you just didn't have it all together up here. So, you name a power of attorney. Now, the form that I gave you, I'll get the form out too so that you have it. It's a very simple form. Very simple form. One page. One page only. And this gives all of the things that the person who's going to act as your agent, all the things they have to do, and It is signed, and that's it. Now, if you wanted to make it into a legal document, you need 2 witnesses and a notary. And then it could be a legal document. If you don't get that, it's still valid, but it's not a legal document until you get 2 witnesses and a notary. So that is the financial power of attorney. And you need to do it early on, while you still got it up here. Okay, let's go on. Let's now talk about long-term care insurance. Now, I don't know why I'm even bringing it up with you, because long-term care insurance, number one, it's expensive. There is an ideal time, if you're gonna take it out, an ideal time to do it, and a ridiculous time to do it. All of us are in the ridiculous time to do it. That doesn't mean that somebody wouldn't sell it to you.
Yeah, they would.
They would. But the ideal time to get it is between age 50 and 60.
Right.
That's the ideal time if you're going to get long-term care insurance. Because beginning at age 50, the premium goes up only 2 to 3% per year until you hit 60. Once you hit 60, the premium goes up 7, 8, 9% per year. Per year.
Wow.
So, and that gets very expensive. So if you were in that 50 to 60 range, ideal time to take it out if you want to do it. Remember, the average time people spend in a nursing home, etc., is only 2 years. Now, is it going to be worth those 2 years, what you're putting into it? You got to think about that. So, okay. That's basically, I'm not telling you to do it or not to. I'm telling you, don't do it. Not at our age. We don't need it. We don't need it. Okay.
You probably wouldn't qualify anyway.
Probably not. I know my wife never qualified because she has arthritis, believe it or not. Arthritis.
Exactly.
Any excuse
That's why
they can
between
use.
50 and 60, you might be in a little bit better health.
Well, to make it to 60, you got to be in a little better.
Right.
Exactly. Okay, what's next? Reverse mortgages. Now, there are a few people who probably be a good idea. It does give you some money so that you can stay in your house. And once you pass away, the house goes to the bank that has it. Usually AIG does most of the reverse mortgage. So for a few people, it's probably a good thing. But for the majority of people, I would not. I know I didn't. But I wouldn't argue if somebody was financially strapped, but they had they paid their mortgage off, they still have that house. Consider a reverse mortgage. They'll give you the value of the house, basically, whenever you need it, and you give it to the bank when you pass away. So, for a few people, it's not a bad thing. That's a reverse mortgage. Next thing now, housing. Housing. You've got several choices. That's always a big deal. I know even my wife and I are talking about, well, what are we going to do? Downsize. We got to do something. Well, we raised 10 kids in our house, so it's a fairly sizable house. Damn big house for 2 people. So we don't use a section of it, basically, and don't heat it. But these are things you think about. And housing is very important. What are your options? 85% of people, if you ask them that question, they want to stay at home. I know I want to stay at home. But I wouldn't argue if somebody wanted to go somewhere, but no. So staying at home is probably the best option for most people. And so you can be totally independent. or at least as much as you can be. You can get in-home help. Not necessarily home health aid, but just some people may be a homemaker, or some people bring meals, cook meals for you, whatever. You have to know that if a social worker goes into your house, what they're going to do is they're going to evaluate how you handle activities of daily living. What are the activities of daily living? You got to be able to feed yourself. You got to be able to clothe yourself. You got to be able to get up and down. Now, not necessarily running any marathon, but at least able to get up and down and do some things. What else? Are you able to handle financial affairs? All these things are activities of daily living. And if two or more of those activities of daily living you can't accomplish, you can't do it. You either can't wash yourself, can't feed yourself properly, hygiene, etc. Dress yourself. If there are two activities you can't do, you could qualify for assisted living. Now, we're going to go on to that in a moment. Activities of daily living are important. Communication. Now, I know for a lot of you, even going on the computer and doing things on the computer are taxing sometimes. I know I don't even bother anymore. I let my kids do that, but I don't do the banking. I don't do that stuff online. I could probably if I really looked into it and put my mind to it. I could do it, but I have no intention of doing that. So, aging in place. Make sure your home is safe. Do a safety check on the house, or get somebody in. Sometimes the local fire department have little safety units, and they will come to a house and they will assess the house for safety. Making sure you have adequate lighting, especially on stairs. Make sure you have grab bars in the shower. Make sure you have bars if you have stairs going into the house. Make sure that there are no slippery rugs around. All these things are part of the safety check that they will do. So you need to have that. A lot of times they'll even recommend that you get one of those buttons. Those little buttons that you can get. And if I've fallen and I can't get up, you press the button and you can communicate with them saying, hey, whatever, I got chest pain, whatever. They'll send somebody immediately over. So all those things are part of the safety of the house. If you're going to live in-house, and it's a good thing to do, you want to make sure it's a safe house. Make sure it's safe. Now, let's say that you need some assistance with one of the activities of daily living. Either, say you have trouble cooking. You just can't see well. So, you prefer not to have to use the stove because you might even leave it on too long, So, you may get a homemaker in, which is fine. There's some very good agencies out there. They do vet all of the people who are part of that agency now, and you can select. You don't have to take the first person that they send over. You select somebody you feel comfortable with to be your homemaker. So, you need some assistance with one of the activities of daily living, you get it. Still a heck of a lot cheaper than going out and living somewhere else. So those are all part of aging in place. Make sure too that you have good transportation. I just use a member of the family, for example. If my wife has to go for an eye appointment or something, I'll call her, she'll pick her up, bring her. But you don't necessarily have to have a family member, could be a neighbor, could be someone that you trust to give you transportation to go to your appointments. You need that for the home. Now, there's also what's called a village concept. you may live in an old house with many apartments in it. I know we have several in Shrewsbury, and there's probably about 8 apartments in there, all seniors or disabled people who live in those houses. And there's a communal breakfast, a communal eating area in there. And the people who own the house will do the cooking or have somebody do the cooking, and you have the meal, your room, individual bathroom, individual telephone, TV. You have all the essentials, and you don't have to do anything outside. They'll clean it up, they'll do all that. So that's a village concept. Again, it costs, but the cost of that is a heck of a lot less. Probably going to cost you about anywhere between $30,000 to $40,000 a year, as opposed to $100,000 a year if you went to a nursing home. So, okay, so that's the village concept. Now you can go to an independent living facility. In other words, you own your own little unit. Salmon has individual independent living units. There are others in the community too that have independent living. You live in your own apartment, but everything else is taken care of for you. In other words, you can still do your cooking, you still do most of the activities. If you need one activity of daily living help, you can have the in-home help come in to your independent living facility and do it. So that costs a little bit more, probably going to cost you about, $50,000 a year, but that's still half of what you would pay for the nursing home. And you still have some degree of independence, independent living. The next one up would be residential care. Now that varies all over the board. Depends on how the state defines residential care. But in Massachusetts, basically, they have to provide not just the lodging, but the meals and a nurse. So that's the added advantage to being in a residential care. Now, it's not necessarily your nurse, but the nurse is available all the time. Then you may go up another step to a continued care. Now, in the continued care, be like Southgate in Shrewsbury. I'm not sure what they have in Auburn, but there are continued care facilities. So that if you start out, you may start out in an independent unit. And then, as you begin to lose the ability to do a couple more activities of daily living, you may have to move up to an assisted living unit. So you move. Same community, only from independent now to assisted living. So that's continued care. They care for you right up to the end. Then you may go into directly an assisted living facility. There they have to define which activities of daily living you need. This is not an easy decision. Whoever it is that goes with you to that assisted living facility, make sure that they know what your needs are. You define what your needs are. And your son or daughter, whoever goes with you, needs to know that, because that has to be provided at that assisted living. They vary all over the board. Some are good doing one thing, some are good doing another. You want someone who's going to help you with those particular aspects that you can't do well. There has to be, by law, a nurse there all the time. Has to be. Could be a doctor too, but they don't get too many really good doctors who want to do that type of work. So usually you'll wind up with, say, a nurse practitioner. But it's not bad. Not bad. Assisted living. That costs more. Now you're getting up into the $70,000 to $80,000 range. And then finally a nursing home. So The nursing home, you lose total control. Door's locked. You get out when they let you out. They have their own van. They bring you back. Nursing home. Now, I've got a lot of experience with nursing homes. Like I told you at the beginning, I had my mother and a sister in the nursing home facility. And we'll talk a little further about that later. But that's the biggest thing, is that you lose total control. And now in Massachusetts, we're talking probably $100,000 a year. So, how do you pick a nursing home, or how do you pick a facility? Well, first of all, I mentioned you need to know what your needs are. And that varies with the individuals. You need to pick a good location. You want to be around family. You want to be around friends so they can visit you. So location is very important. Your finances. What can you afford? That is a big key, a big key. A lot of times you're going to have to apply for Medicaid. Medicaid pays nursing homes in about 70 to 75% of the patients who are in there. Medicaid. The earlier you can apply, the better. Okay. That is where you want to live. The last thing for today, anyway, funeral pre-planning. Now, I thought, originally many years ago, well, we'll just get a plot. So we bought a plot in the cemetery in town. And we figured, well, that's it for now. Well, come to find out after I went through it all with my mother and my sister, there's a lot more to pre-planning than I figured. So what is pre-planning and prepaying? Well, pre-planning, all of the funeral directors will give you a brochure and give you a packet of material that you have to fill out. Many of them use that packet to write your obituary. Maybe you decide, well, I don't want him writing my obituary. He doesn't know me from Adam. I'll write my own. It's okay. That's fine. You can write your own. I know I got mine partly written. Fine. Why not? I want to keep it succinct, to the point. I don't need a whole page. So, but at any rate, that's why they get all of that material, so they can write up that obituary. But the cost of all these things, and let me get my original page. This is what the funeral director will want. That's it, one page. Of course, this page translates to many pages that you have to write out. These are the costs to have a funeral now. What do they look at? Well, first of all, basic services. The basic services include picking up the body, transporting it to the church or wherever you're going to have a wake, transporting it then to church, transporting it to where you're going to be buried. All of those things are part of their service. They also, possibly, if you're going to be around a while, they may have to embalm you. Most people don't get embalmed anymore. Usually you have your service and your wake within 2 to 3 days. They don't have to embalm you under those circumstances. But they can. They can. But that cost, embalming cost, and that's included in the cost in case you, $650 to get embalmed. But at any rate, the basic service for this particular funeral home is $2,350, $2,350. Okay. All of the things that they have to do, transportation, etc., that costs roughly $1,500 for all of the transportation. And you can have all sorts of different transportation. You can have just a regular van. You can have a fancy van. A little bit more if you want to have a fancy van. All those things are included in this as well. Do you wanna have a wake? Well, things changed with COVID a little bit. People didn't now have a wake at the funeral home anymore. Now you can, under certain circumstances, you can have a wake. A lot of the churches now will allow have a wake right at the church ahead of time, so that you do it all in one day. Have a wake in the morning, have your noontime funeral, and then afterwards have a little get-together somewhere with the people who came. So these are all very flexible, but they all cost a little money. Flowers cost, at least here, $400. Those are the flowers that go around the casket, basically. Most of the funeral homes do not sell the caskets themselves. They have an independent casket place that sells them, and there's a catalog. And you can buy a wooden casket, full thick wood. You can buy a veneer casket, shiny on the outside, old pine on the inside. You can have a metal casket. All these things are different prices, but that's the price of all of the caskets. They go from roughly about $1,500 for the cheapest, all the way to $30,000 for a beautiful casket. So, I don't want a $30,000 casket. That's included in the cost.
How much do they charge for a wake at a funeral home?
A wake.
Yeah, you didn't say that one.
Yep, oh, I'm
just
sorry, I
curious.
left that out, didn't I? It is $15.95, 1595.
They provide all the food and everything?
No,
That's just for the
that's
baby.
extra if you want it. They charge for the funeral service itself.
$1,595.
Yep. The funeral is 1,625, 1,625. And on this side of the page are all the basic charges.
I thought the churches usually do the funeral part though, right?
They can. It's up to the individual, the pastor of each church.
So what about cremation?
Cremation is a lot cheaper,
Right.
and a lot quicker. And and you can put the urn in the plot that you bought.
So what, do you have a catalog to pick out the urn?
There's a
and all that?
catalog,
Yeah.
yes, yep,
And then you just you still have to pick a funeral home?
yes.
So is it just one fee that they
One
pick
fee.
up the body? do it,
Yeah,
and then you
they
pick
will,
up the urn?
one fee, plus the urn.
Right.
And the urns go all the way up to $1,000 if you want a beautiful urn.
Are the prices for the different funeral parlors, are they kind of controlled by the state?
They're state regulated,
So if,
and many of them have this same charge. Because this charge I think I got this only a month ago. So these are up-to-date charges and probably reflect what's in most of the nursing homes now.
so if you go to one funeral parlor, is it recommended you go to maybe, if you want to redo this, to maybe 2 or 3, compare the prices?
You can.
Or
You
it's
can.
just a waste of time, because they're all gonna be the same?
Yep. Well, I don't know if they're all the same or not. I haven't really looked into that at all.
Yeah, I didn't know if they were all kind of controlled by the
But
state.
they are controlled. There's a lot of control, state control.
So what's the price for cremation here then?
Let's see, cremation. The cremation, this particular place did not do the cremation themselves. They sent it to one of 2 places where they do cremations. $700 for cremation,
So it's just a flat fee,
flat fee, plus the urn.
plus the urn, right?
Plus,
What's the cheapest urn someone can buy?
you still gotta pay for the transportation from where you passed away to the
Right.
funeral parlor. You have to pay the funeral parlor a certain amount of money to prepare the body. So it's
Right.
not just $700.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I was asking, is that, but it doesn't cover everything.
No,
you say.
no, no, it doesn't. But that is just the cremation itself. Now, that's on this side of the sheet. On the other side of the sheet are the things that are flexible. So that when you prepay this side and what is estimated, the charges on this side. Now, what are the charges that are flexible? The charge for death certificates, because you need probably a good 15 or so death certificates. You need to have a permit, believe it or not, in Massachusetts, so that's another $20. You gotta pay the clergy at the church,
How much is a death certificate?
$10 a certificate.
And what did you say after that? You need a what? A
The
permit?
health permit. That's at the local Board of Health, so the Auburn Board of Health. That's only $10.
So what if someone has no family or anything and they die?
Well, if they don't have any insurance or, I guess, I'm not sure what happens when you don't.
I think the people who have mass health pays something like, I don't know what it is now, but it used to be like 200 or 300 or something, they pay towards the funeral.
Yeah, it depends, say if you were in the military, there's a fund available. Medicaid if you're, but, yeah,
So the permit's, what, $10 usually?
it's not cheap, it's very
So
cheap.
that you need one.
One, yeah. You have to prepare the cemetery, $895 to dig the hole in the ground, put whatever you need at the cemetery. To publish the obituary, Telegram and Gazette, $600 to put your obit in. So all of these things cost, they all cost. Basically, this particular one would cost $12,000. And that's assuming the casket they allowed $24.95. And the one I picked out was $24.95. $12,000. Now, if you want to prepay, what are the things you need to look out for? Again, that's very strictly regulated in Massachusetts. What you can do, you don't necessarily have to prepay the funeral home. In fact, it's frowned upon to prepay directly to the funeral home. Because there have been some bad actors, I don't know why, but there have been some bad actors in the past, so they don't recommend that you pay directly to the funeral home. What most of the funeral homes do is that they will contract with an outside agency. Now that outside agency may take out an annuity or an insurance policy or use it for investment, whatever, but they will guarantee that that amount will be available to the funeral home when you pass away. So if I paid that $12,000 in, it would go into a trust run by that third party. And the third parties in Massachusetts, there's only about 3 or 4 that are approved by the state government to do this sort of thing. The weird thing about this is that if they put it into an investment account and that investment account earns a fair amount of money in interest over the years, you have to pay the damn income tax on the interest. In Massachusetts, you have to pay the interest. It's crazy. And even if you put it into an irrevocable account, in other words, you can't change it. You're not the owner anymore. The trust is the owner, period. And the beneficiary is the nursing home. IRS says, now you still got to pay the income tax on the interest on that. They get you one way or another. So that's basically what pre-planning and prepaying funerals are like. Prepaid. But there are advantages to prepay.
Yeah.
That cost, if you did it a year from now, or 2 years, or 5 years, or God knows how long, I'm hoping to outlive my mother, I'm gonna be around another 20 years, God forbid, but it's gonna be a lot more than if you did it then. So you're saving money in the long run. You're not saving it for yourself, you're saving it for the beneficiaries of your estate. And I wanna make it as easy as possible, as all of you do. You wanna make it as easy as possible for the people you leave behind who have to deal with all this nonsense after you pass away. So, that's why I'm doing this now. But I am very careful about, before I go and sign anything to prepay, I wanna make sure exactly what their responsibilities are. I wanna know all that stuff up front before I sign a check and pay for that. Okay, yes,
Just one thing, on the funeral, I was told about if you're signing up for Medicaid and you have money and you're trying to spend down, one thing they'll allow you to do is put money towards a funeral, so that's a way of decreasing your assets.
if you do that, it's a good thing, but it has to be an irrevocable trust.
Okay.
That's the only caveat. Has to be irrevocable for Medicaid. Then they don't count it as an asset when you're applying for
That's
Medicaid.
the only thing, they don't count as an asset then.
Two questions. On that prepaid funeral, and then there's that $1 million, your estate.
Yep,
I know you're gonna pay the tax on that, on whatever they make on that prepaid, but does that amount that you pay, is that included in, that you still have it in your estate, or is it that deducted from your estate?
if the estate prepays for the funeral, then you can deduct it. In other words, if you paid for it out of you gave them a check with your name on it and individually bought it, you can't deduct that. But if the estate pays for it,
They can deduct?
you can.
Okay. The other thing too is on the funeral expenses, isn't there a cement variable, very vault that you have to pay for too?
Was there what?
The cement vault?
A vault.
The vault to
cement
put the
vault?
casket in.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's another expense, isn't it?
Yes, that is an expense too, the vault. I should have mentioned that. That's another 350 bucks. That's all part of it.
It's my understanding that they don't use those vaults in the cemeteries anymore.
I hope not. It saves you 350 bucks. But, I don't know. But they still charge you for the canopy and the installation and all that sort of stuff. Okay, listen, I'm sorry to keep you long. Next time, we're gonna talk about the absolute end-of-life issues. We're gonna talk about the forms that we're going to have, the 5 wishes, the advance directive. We're gonna talk about the MOLST form. We're gonna talk about DNR. We're gonna talk about all of the things right at the end of life. And it's gonna take a full hour. That's why I divided this up in this way.
Somebody has a question.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I tried to prepay my, cremation, because they told them I wanted to be cremated and only have a viewing of my body already in the casket and have like 2-hour calling hours. And they told me how much it was, and then when people, they wanted to take out loan to pay.
Whoa. That
And I wanted
expensive?
the money, why didn't I just pay it before it goes up? What if I live another 15 years?
Yeah. You should be able to pay that at a time.
If you prepay for a funeral ahead of time, and that funeral parlor changes hands, or if you move out of state to live with a kid somewhere,
Yeah.
what happens with the money you pay?
Well, that, in Massachusetts, that's all spelled out in the regulations. That funeral home has to then if they go out of business for whatever reason, they have to transfer that to another funeral home. They have to. It's gonna be in the contract.
Yeah, you don't have the right to pick another funeral.
You, well, you probably could mention it in your will that if this one doesn't work out because they go out of business, I would prefer to go to this one. And they have to honor that
Yeah, okay,
in Massachusetts. Remember, each state is different.
I know. Such a headache.
It is a headache.
You can't even die in peace.
And then, the only good thing about it in Massachusetts is you don't have to pay Massachusetts tax on your social security. That's the only good thing.
Unless you get cremated.
And there's no inheritance tax.
If there are some questions, please, just,
No, I didn't get to remind you when you did revocable trust, the pour over will, is that just a quick thing you could mention? You said something about needing that, the pour over will?
The pour over will. If you have both, a will and a trust, you pour over whatever you didn't think about to go into that will. You pour that automatically over to the trust, which then covers it.
So that's a separate document?
Yeah, that's just an extra page to the will, a pour over will.
Thank you.
all right, well, okay, so you have questions, Charlie? Just hold on, I have something to talk about after, Dr. Clermont is
Yeah.
done.
Hey, Dr. Clermont.
Hi.
I was curious, you mentioned about the cost of plots, just buying the plot is,
Well, that varies with the cemetery and the town that you're in. I know it cost me, I think, $800 for the plot, and then another $300 or $400 to maintain, mow the grass, maintain it regularly, etc. So it costs about $1,200, and that's a 4-person plot.
which you had bought years ago.
I bought that years ago. I thought that was very naive then. I thought that was pre-planning,
I made a call on one plot recently and they wanted $5,500 just for an individual.
Where is that?
I don't wanna disparage someone's name. But that's what they charge.
Well, it's gone up quite a bit then. I got mine in 2002.
Yeah,
So it's gone up
that's the only
considerably.
explanation. Everything's gone up anyway.
Yeah. But you can look at different places. Don't just go by one. There are different cemeteries. You can check it out.
Yeah, for real.
Definitely.
So, all right, thank you very much, and all of you for coming. Thank you for great presentation. The only thing I would like to mention is, as you heard that Dr. Clermont said, that staying in your home is the best thing for as long as you can. And yes, there are some agencies, they help you to stay in their own homes. It doesn't have to do anything with your insurance or it does have to do with income. It's called those state-funded agencies. Those are agencies by state, private agencies funded by state. So they do have eligibility criteria, like income eligibility is there, but if your income is not too high, you can get homemaker, you get lifeline, which Dr. Clermont was talking, it's a safety button, you can get Meals on Wheels, you can, there is a package, and then depending upon your income, there is free like flat fee for that. And you can look into that before anything else. If you want to stay in your home and you feel that you need some help, you can call me, or I do have information of those agencies I can give you. And they have many different programs. If you don't qualify for one program of their home care program, then there are other programs they can look into that if you qualify for that. But if you are over income for those services, Then there are a list of private pay agencies. You know, it's independent, you contact them, you pay them per hour, it's little bit expensive, but you know, there is no third party involved in that. So all that information I have with me, and every other place like Senior Center might have too. If you ever you consider that you are getting tired, you are not able to take care of yourself, please reach out, please come to me, talk to me, and I can advise, give as much advice as I have. So that's what I wanted to mention it to you, that you know, you don't have to be really worried if you want to stay home. Just look into all the other things before you decide anything else, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.